Hello everyone. In today's video, we are going to study The Mayor of Casterbridge written by Thomas R.D. from a feminist critical perspective. This explanation is meant for the UG students. So I'll explain everything in simple language with clear examples and also point out important exam ideas. By the end of this video, you will clearly understand how women characters in the novel are controlled, judged, and punished by the Victorian society. First, let's the social background. The novel is set in Victorian England, a society dominated by patriarchy. Patriarchy means a system where men hold authority, women are expected to obey, a woman's identity depends on her husband and reputation. Women had very limited freedom, no real legal independence, no social protection if they were abandoned or nudged immoral. This background is extremely important to understand the sufferings of Susan and Lucetta. Victorian society prioritized male authority and female obedience. When we apply a feminist lens, we focus on women's agency, gender inequality, double standards in morality. We ask questions like: are women given choices? Are men and women judged equally? Who controls women's lives? Thomas Hardy does not openly call himself a feminist, but through his characters, he reveals the injustice women face. Hardy exposes patriarchy through storytelling, not preaching. Susan Henchard's character is a silently enduring character. Let us now look at Susan Henchard. Susan is one of the most tragic female characters in the novel. She is sold by her husband Michael Henchard in a public fair, treated like an object. Despite this humiliation, she does not rebel openly. She accepts suffering quietly. She values social respectability over personal happiness. Susan represents the ideal Victorian woman, patient, obedient, and silent. Susan's silence is not weakness, but a result of social conditioning. Marriage as control system. In this novel, marriage is not shown as romantic or equal. For women like Susan, marriage is a survival system. Leaving marriage means social death. Divorce is unacceptable. Even when Henchard mistreats her, Susan returns to him because society offers her no alternative. Thus, marriage becomes a tool of patriarchal control. Marriage in the novel limits women's autonomy rather than protecting them. Lucetta Templeman, her desire and punishment. Now let us move on to the next character, Lucetta Templeman. Lucetta is very different from Susan. She is emotional, expressive, open, open about love and happiness. She tries to live life on her own terms, but society does not forgive her for this. Susan survives by silence, Lucetta suffers for expression. Skimity Ride, the patriarchal punishment. Skimity Ride is one of the most important feminist moments of the novel, and it is a public mockery where Lucetta is humiliated, turned into spectacle, judged without any legal or moral fairness. This event is not comedy, it is collective patriarchal punishment. The public opinion replaces justice, especially in the case of women. Lucetta's health collapses after this humiliation, showing the violent psychological impact of social shaming. While comparing the characters of Susan and Lucetta, Susan's agency is quiet, moral, and survival oriented, whereas Lucetta's agency is emotional, visible, and individualistic. Both women try to assert control over their lives, but both are restricted by patriarchal norms. Hardy shows diversity in women's experiences, not a single type of victimhood. To conclude, The Mayor of Casterbridge is not only the novel about fate and character, it's also a powerful critique of Victorian patriarchy, gender inequality, moral double standards. Through Susan and Lucetta, Thomas Hardy exposes how society controls, judges, and punishes women. Now, let us see some theoretical points behind it. Feminist theory critiques literature's reinforcement of women's oppression under male dominated social systems. In Casterbridge, we examine how gender dictates destiny. Hardy's novel exposes patriarchal ownership and controls over women, reflecting the harsh legal and social realities of the 19th century Wessex landscape. Hardy's novel exposes patriarchal ownership and control over women, reflecting the harsh legal and social realities of the 19th century Wessex landscape. Susan and experiences reveal systematic gender biases and desperate struggle for female agency in a world that denies them a voice. Auction of Susan, commodification manifested. The man was Michael Henchard. I'll sell her for 5 guineas to any man that I'll take her off my hands. Symbolic control. Henchard's drunken auction of Susan symbolizes extreme male control, literally transforming a human being into a tradable commodity. Legal realities. This act reflects the coverture laws where women were treated as property, lacking legal status independent of their husbands. The public spectacle of the fair underscores social societal complicity. The onlookers become witnesses to the normalized erasure of the female humanity. Susan Henchard, a feminist entry point. Susan is introduced not as a fully realized individual but as a marital object when Henchard sells her at the fair. Systemic critic. Feminist criticism treats this act not as an isolated cruel moment, as an emblem of the systemic commodification of women. Social commentary. Hardy's unflinching depiction invites readers to critique, not romanticize, the social order. Susan Henchard, Resilience Behind the Veil. The Stoic Victim. Despite amendment and public humiliation, Susan embodies a quiet, steel like resilience and moral strength throughout the narrative. Maternal agency. Hardy portrays her as a figure caught in the patriarchy, a paradoxical figure with high social status and worldly experience. Yet, despite these advantages, she is still constrained by gendered expectations about respectability and sexual property. And her story expands feminist critique from passive victimhood to gendered reputational vulnerability across classes. Female desire and social censure. Reputation. Lucetta Templeman's character, she is sensible and highly educated and a fashionable lady. And we see that her character implies some sort of instability with the Casterbridge ambience. Lucetta's pursuit of love with Henchard is an attempt to assert emotional agency, but Victorian society frames her desires transgressive. Her punishment, the Skimity Ride, illustrates how patriarchy enforces conformity through public shaming rather than private understanding. and she deserves it, as we can see that already we have seen with Elizabeth Jane's character some sort of dilemmas she undergoes with the Henchard, choosing Henchard, and within that Henchard in a column. Lucetta's social position and constraint. Despite her class privilege, Lucetta cannot escape patriarchal scrutiny. Her adherence to social etiquette does not protect her, it instead traps her within the performance of femininity that is continually evaluated by male authority and public gaze. Here, class intersects with gender to compound constraint. Public committee ride as a collective patriarchy. Rosetta temperaments with a relationship with the former mayor Henchard that results in the Skimity Ride. The scandal mongering group, they arrange the Skimity Ride, which is a symbolic representation of patriarchal society. And Lucetta Temperman, who is very sensitive, falls paralyzed because of this Skimity Ride. It is not a random event, it is symbolic of collective enforcement of gender norms. Lucetta is paraded as a moral spectacle, demonstrating that public opinion often replaces justice, particularly for women. Feminist criticism reads this event as patriarchal theater, not isolated comedy. Feminist insight, limitations and subversions. Hardy neither idealizes nor dismisses his female characters. He has created strong female characters, whether it is Lucetta Templeman or Susan Henchard, both are morally strong, and at the same time, we see that there are some flaws with those characters too. The mayor of Casterbridge exposes how Victorian patriarchy constrains autonomy, objectifies identity, and enforces reputational hierarchies. Susan and Lesota endure, resist, and reveal the hidden structures that shape women's lives. Their narratives encourage readers to question and confront gendered injustice. Hardy neither idealizes nor dismisses his female characters. On the whole, we see that the character of Lucetta Timberman, who is highly sensitive and at last who meets death. And equally, we can see the other important character, Susan Henchard, who is morally strong, and till the end she protests and she struggles to get one place for her daughter Elizabeth Jane, and even before her death, she struggles to hide the secret behind the birth of her daughter. So we can see that both the characters are equally important and both of them are turning points in the novel. Thank you. We can move towards the questions and discussion part.